Hello everyone, Travis here, and I've decided I'm going to start a tutorial series for you all. Today's episode I'm going to give you guys some scenery tips and tricks. First up, I'm going to go over some basic scenery. The first tip I want to give you all is to build in layers. Basically what that means is there are two sides to every wall. So when you put a wall piece on the edge of a tile and you put a wall piece on the edge of the tile directly next to it, they actually sit right against each other. At this point, I'm just more or less putting together the basic shape for the building, and I'm going to show you on this small structure several things relating to building in layers. So for starters, if you look at this building, it's not perfectly square. And that's kind of important because in order for things to look realistic in this game, especially with the isometric kind of classic view we have, you have to kind of go against the grid in a lot of ways. That's why I have this front bit that's protruding out of what appears to be the main part of the building. The main part of the building is also a little bit higher than the front part. And a couple of things you need to know for building, especially on multiple levels, is in order to move a piece up or down, you just hold down the shift key and then slide your mouse like normal, and it will actually move the piece up and down. And then to move things left and right, you hover over something on whatever level you're trying to build at, and then you push the control key, and then it will put the piece on that same level on either side of it. And you can move your mouse left and right and put that piece anywhere on that level. So going back to what I was saying about there being two sides to a wall, if you look, what I've done is I put the white wall to the inside of those interior squares so that I can put different pieces on the outside of the building to add detail. And what that does is, again, it keeps the building from looking generic, gives it some personality, and also allows it to look a little bit more realistic in an otherwise unrealistic looking game. This can be done with fences or perhaps another wall type. The railings, the poles, and I like to use these steel lattices as well. Sky's the limit for the most part, and honestly it's kind of up to your own creativity, experimentation, and imagination. So definitely don't be afraid to think outside of the box. And then the other thing as far as layers go is you want to make sure that you use shrubs and trees and things to kind of make it look a little bit more finished. Now in this case, I'm not completely satisfied with the way that looks because it's kind of just a demonstration building. But just to give you kind of an idea, there's certainly a lot you can do with vegetation. The other thing that is important is, although buildings can be strictly for aesthetic purposes, it makes sense, especially on a main street like this, to use at least some of the buildings to house the majority of the shops and stalls. And then I also like to paint the terrain inside of the buildings, because in real life you wouldn't have a grass floor inside of this restroom. Anyway, realistically speaking, I think that most of the shops and stalls in this game are kind of ugly anyway. So me personally, I like to put them inside of buildings that I'm able to create. It gives the park more of a custom look, and combined with the terrain painting and all the other details, it just overall looks better. And now for this next part, we're going to go into a section that I'm calling advanced scenery. And what we're going to do is basically expand upon what we've already been working on. And for starters, we're going to put a simple roller coaster in so that we can build a station around it and make it fit in with this building that we just built, so it all looks like it's meant to be together. I'm just going to build a simple layout for this junior roller coaster. The ratings will be pretty much non-existent, but just for demonstration purposes, so you can kind of get a sense of how rides and other elements affect scenery. There we go, that looks okay. And another important element is the path, which I'll show you here in a little bit. Let's just get this thing going real quick. Alright, here we go with the path. One thing about the AI in this game is the people are kind of stupid. So one thing that I've learned over time is that it's actually better if you connect the exit path and the queue to the main path separately. If you can avoid it, don't connect the queue to the exit path at all. That way you can put a no entrance sign on the main path blocking the exit path. The fewer places your people have access to, the less likely they are to get lost. Let me just get this all connected to the main path here real quick. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is terrain and water. These two elements are used complementary to each other. and they make such a huge difference in the overall aesthetic of whatever you're working on, especially rides. I went ahead and put this pond underneath the path, and I'm modifying the path so that it's a bridge going over the water. When I do bridges in this game, especially over water, I like to change the path type. I'm not sure why, but to me it just kind of adds more layers to it. And I'm also going to pull up the terrain in and around this helix over here. Again, since it's a demonstration, it's not quite what I would have in an actual game, but this way hopefully you're able to get some ideas on how you can incorporate terrain editing and water in your own park. Given the limitations of this game, something that is good to do is when you're messing with the terrain, toy around with the terrain paint, and also each square that you pull up, try to put it at a different level and at a different angle than the one next to it. That way it gives it more texture. There's definitely a lot you can do with terrain, and I will be doing a terrain specific tutorial at some point later in this series. But for the purpose of this small coaster, this is the extent of the terraforming that we'll be doing. One of the biggest things about terraforming is that by getting a little bit creative with the terrain and using it as part of the theming for your ride, it looks so much better than the generic flat designs. And I think even in real life, rides that hug the terrain are a lot more exciting than the ones that kind of just sit inside a cleared area. Moving on from that and back to the coaster itself, when it comes to constructing the building around a station, I sometimes like to start with some sort of foundation level. To me, I feel like in real life, a lot of the stations, especially for the more permanent coasters, are built on at least some sort of concrete slab or something to that effect, just to help with the structure of it. So in this case, I did decide to do that. And going back to the central theme of this whole thing, it adds another layer. As you can see, I decided to use the Roman wall in this case for the foundation. You know, I'm not in love with how it looks, but for some reason I'm lacking a few pieces in the scenery for this park. I just created it, and so I've got to go in and tweak some things, but it's all good. Once you have the foundation level down, the next step is to put your walls on top of it. When you're doing the foundation, that's when you're going to more or less decide the shape of the building. I'm just going with a simple rectangular building for this coaster. I know I had mentioned before that that's kind of boring, but what I'm going to do is with the detailing that I add to it, I'm going to make it look a little less boxy. And also keep in mind that the goal is to get it to fit in with the building right in front of it. And you'll see as time progresses that it'll all look like it's one thing. But yeah, so moving right along. If you're paying close attention, you'll notice at this point I actually cheat a little bit. I'm using OpenRCT2, which if you don't know what that is, Google it and get it because it's amazing. But with that, there are some extended options for you. And so I used the disable clearance checks option in the dropdown to allow me to put the wall on the inside grid square so that I could add the second layer on the outside. I hope that doesn't confuse anybody. But honestly, it's not a big deal if you don't know how or if you don't have the ability to do that, because it can easily be done without it. Just in general, it makes life a little bit easier to have that option, and since I have Open Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, it kind of wouldn't really make sense for me not to use it. So now we're going to continue on and move into the detailing section of this. And like I mentioned earlier, this can really be done at your own discretion. Get creative, don't hesitate to try different things. That's kind of what we're all out here doing, creating our own sort of style and brand, and really just having fun while we do it. And so pretty much that's what I'm doing right now, is just experimenting with the different pieces that I have in my toolbox of scenery. I'm not taking this as seriously as I would in like a real Let's Play or something to that effect, but you know, you always want to make sure that you're putting effort into it, otherwise you're just wasting time, and that's kind of pointless. I'm still keeping with the red and white theme, but in this case I'm actually going to include yellow and blue as well. I tend to use a lot of white buildings. I like the contrast that I get when I put any other color on top of white. And again, don't forget to include the path as part of the experience. Getting to the station platform in a lot of ways is part of the ride experience. And in some places where they do a good job with the line theming and everything, it kind of builds up to the actual ride itself. And you know, that's really awesome. And yeah, just continuing on, trying to make everything look as cohesive as possible. At this point, it's just me adding a bunch of details. Another thing I like to do is when I'm putting on the details, I like to use a lot of different types of pieces and see how I can get them to complement each other. And yeah, just more of me doing my thing and yada yada and trying to see how it's all going to turn out, etc, etc. Feel free to give this video a thumbs up. Likes definitely help both for me to understand what content people are enjoying and also for YouTube to help with refining searches and things like that. And if you want, go ahead and comment below if you have anything that you want me to demonstrate or teach you how to do in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. There are certainly a lot of areas we could cover in this series. The building is more or less taking shape at this point, and as you can see, it's certainly improved over the course of its creation from it being just a boxy sort of concept to almost a finished product now. Something that I have come to realize is that sometimes more is better. If a building is not quite looking the way you want it to, just keep adding stuff to it, and eventually it is more than likely going to start to look good to you. And also, another tip is to step away if you need to, and come back to it later. Sometimes when you come back with a fresh mindset, you'll be surprised what you're able to do. And that is the completed building right there. At this point, we're going to add a few trees and we're going to fence in the roller coaster. The reason why this is important, not only does it make it look good, but it's more realistic. I mean, you wouldn't want people walking into the roller coaster area and like crossing the track and all of that stuff. So in real life, they do have fences around at least the parts of the roller coaster that are low to the ground. And of course, the point of all of this is to be as realistic as possible. Another thing I like to do is, since we have this bridge, I went ahead and put some railings and I'm putting a roof on it. Again, just to add to the overall ride experience and to make it look more inviting. And just adding some last minute details to the landscape, and then putting trees around the roller coaster is actually one of the best ways to increase the excitement. I'm not sure how a tree makes the ride more exciting other than the fact that, of course, it would amplify the ride experience. Whatever the case, it definitely makes it look nicer. And we are getting pretty close to done, guys. We're just going to change the color of the track and cars to match and finish everything up, make sure we didn't miss anything. I also like to give a little coaster like this a kid-friendly name, and in this case I've gone with Crazy Cars, and Crazy and Cars are both spelled with a K, and Cars ends with a Z. But yeah, that pretty much kind of brings us to the end. I'm going to wrap the main street around and do some last minute touches, but this is basically it for the first episode in this tutorial series. Thank you all for watching, and as usual, I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, evening, night, etc. And I will see you all next time.